my name is Gillian. I'm a compulsive eater. I weigh and measure 3 meals a day from the grey sheet. I write those meals down. I commit them to my sponsor. Abstinence is definitely the most important thing in my life today. And my abstinence date is the 4th of May, 2018. And thank you very much, Leila, for inviting me to speak today on this meeting. And thank you for all the service that everybody is doing here. So there's quite a few newcomers on the meeting tonight. So I want to direct my qualification towards those people, because they always say that the newcomer is the most important person in the room. And I'm trying to remember back to what it was like when I started. So I celebrated 5 years by the grace of God and the support of this community on the 4th of May 2018. So yeah, just over 5 years. So the way it was for me was that I believe definitely that I came into the world as a person who's a compulsive eater, sensitive to certain things that we don't eat, and struggled for up until I came into GreySheet this time. I had attempted GreySheet before 10 years ago, and I'm saying that because not everyone gets it the first time. And I think there's a lot of shame about not being able to get it initially and then coming back in. So yeah, just a shout out to anybody who feels like that, that there is no shame. This is not a moral issue. It's a physical stroke, physical allergy that we have. That's my belief. So yeah, so I was a big baby. I was 9 pounds 8 ounces when I was born, and food was always a big kind of motivator for me, a big interest. And I noticed from a very early age that was unusual. My siblings and my cousins, I'm from Ireland, so back then there were big families, so I had a lot of cousins, and I had 2 siblings, and I spent a lot of time with kind of cousins and things like that, and school friends and all the rest of it. And I wasn't really aware of other people having the same interest in food as I had. And I also began to see at a very early age that wasn't good, that was frowned on. It was considered to be greedy, and that was something that I took on. I felt that I was a greedy person, and yeah, and all the shame around that. And so initially I didn't carry weight, judging by the photographs that I've seen of myself as a child. There were a lot of photographs. I can pretty much document my life in the first 10 years. I didn't carry any weight, but once I hit around 12 or 13, puberty age, the weight started to go on. And then that became a major focus, because I saw weight gain as my problem, which is something that flips when you come into GreySheet. You realize weight gain is a byproduct of another problem. And although we're here, you know, it's great to lose weight. We're solving the issue that causes the weight. So, but the whole thing was the other way around in the dieting industry. It's the opposite. So, yeah, I began dieting when I was a teenager. In Ireland, where when I was growing up in the 80s, when I started dieting, we had a kind of similar thing to Weight Watchers called Unislim. And the first time I joined that, I lost a considerable amount of weight, and I was sort of the star member, and there was kind of like big applause every week as my weight dropped. And I really quite enjoyed that, the encouragement and what have you. But it was very tough to keep that diet going. It was calorie counting, and it wasn't long before, I think I stuck to it for a few months, and as I said, I lost a considerable amount of weight, but I couldn't keep it up. I began to get more and more hungry and more obsessed with food. This was a massive learning curve for me, because that's the way diets worked. And as soon as I stopped dieting, that weight went back on, and all the people who told me that I looked fabulous and I looked great, that I lost weight, it was very, very embarrassing to face them with this extra weight. So I would put on the weight that I'd lost plus more, because that was another thing that I noticed over time. It seemed that every time I pushed myself into one of these diets, the kickback from that diet was worse. coming out of those diets, I became more obsessed with food, more obsessed with the type of foods that we don't eat, and more terrified of having to diet again. And that was the way it was for quite some time. And then in my 20s, the first time I ever came across a 12-step program was a friend of mine read an article in a magazine, and she saw that there was an Overeaters Anonymous meeting, and she suggested that I go to it, and I thought this might help. And so it was the only OA meeting in Ireland at that time. It was in the centre of Dublin, and it was a group of women. And the first thing I noticed about them was they were all very overweight, but yet they had been doing this for some time. And I wanted to know what the food plan was, and they said there was no food plan. They just prayed and hoped that they would stop eating by prayer. They did read out of the big book, and I found the big book to me at that time seemed to be very antiquated. It was kind of like old-fashioned American kind of it was written in that sort of old American style. It was almost like watching an old black and white film from the 1930s or 40s, and it just didn't do for me, which is quite surprising, because now I love the big book. I love the way it's written, and I love its style, and it really speaks to me, but I wasn't ready for it then. And the other thing I noticed about this group was there was no solution, and they weren't in the solution. They sat in a circle and they basically spewed their problems into the room, and there was a lot of crying and tears and wailing and gnashing of teeth. And I found the whole thing just so depressing. There was no solution in there for me. And when I look back on that, it makes me feel very strongly that we should, as we do, always protect our Grey Sheet food plan, because this is what happens when people are allowed. Human nature is that we try and make it easier. We look for an easier, softer way. And also the traditions of 12-step fellowships are very important as well, because again, as human beings, we tend to ease up the rules, loosen the whole thing up, and next thing it becomes about personalities take over, and it becomes their meeting and their way of doing things. So yeah, not to rabbit on about that, but so then after that, I continued to diet, always constantly looking for a solution. My weight just kept going up and up and up. There were times where I was able to diet and get it back down. I found that if I was stressed, I always turned to food. That was a big thing, particularly as I went into third level education. If I was studying, then I would really start eating. It always appeared to be a massive weight gain around the end of an academic year. I also started smoking because I thought that would help control my appetite. It didn't. It was just another addiction. And eventually I had to stop smoking in my early 30s. And at that point, my weight really went through the roof. I weighed at my very highest 16.5 stone. And I'm sorry, I can't work that out in kilograms or pounds at the moment. It's very, very overweight. And then around that time, I moved to London, and I discovered, I decided to try OA again. And at that time, London, I think in London still, there are a huge amount of OA meetings there. You could go to an OA meeting three or four times a day. They're everywhere. And it's a similar sort of experience in ways. There was no food plan. You made up your own food plan in this instance. So I started to try and do 3 meals a day. I was still eating food that we don't eat, that I now know I'm allergic to. And I had some measure of success for periods of time, but again, I was white knuckling it. Really, it was just like being on a diet again, because that stuff was still in my system. And but I did notice while in OA in London that there were people having spiritual experiences, and this was really intriguing to me, very interesting. And I noticed people coming in and their personalities changing because they were working the steps. So what I was noticing in OA was there wasn't very much food recovery or weight loss, if that was at that point, that was what I wanted, weight loss, apart from anything else. But I did notice how the 12 steps could actually transform a person into a much more mature individual.
5 minutes.
Much more well-balanced individual, and I found that very attractive. That. Thank you so much, Nancy. But the thing was that there were never any sponsors available in OA. Well, rarely. If there was a sponsor available, they were probably sponsoring about 10 people. So and generally they became completely overwhelmed by that and step back from it completely. It just wasn't working as far as I could see. And I don't mean to be hard on OA. I know there are people who get a lot out of it, but for me it just wasn't. It wasn't the thing. So then I went into I was looking for OA How, and by accident I ended up in a Grey Sheet meeting in High Street in London. Those meetings are still happening one Saturday every month. If anyone is in the London area, I definitely recommend you to go in there. And this was about 10 years ago, and it was a hideous room in the basement of this church. It was like with hard plastic chairs. It was the most ugliest room you could imagine, with putty coloured walls and really harsh bright lights. And but there was something amazing happening in that room. God was definitely present in my mind, and he was working. And everyone in that room was thin. Now it sounds like I have some kind of fat phobia, or that's not what I'm trying to say here. What I'm trying to say here is something was working for these people, and they were working steps as well. And initially, I found the whole thing just too intense. I found the thought of doing this indefinitely too hard. And so I had a sponsor for about a week, and I went off with the Grey Sheet, and I thought, well, I'll just do it my own way on my own. And that was what's the word I'm looking for? I can't remember the word I'm looking for, but anyway, I stuck to it for about 3 months. It wasn't really Grey Sheet, it was kind of my Grey Sheet. But I was amazed by how much weight I lost. But inevitably, I couldn't keep it up on my own. Like for me personally, I need community support, and I need the structure of this and the spiritual aspect of this. It's like a 3-legged stool. I need all of that to keep me going. So about 5 years later, I had gone into trying to do intuitive eating. I'd also gone into religious programs and various different things, and I had begun traveling to different conferences in different countries to figure out more about intuitive eating, and that definitely just wasn't working for me. And so I decided to give Grey Sheet another go. I was listening to YouTube qualifications. If anyone is interested, YouTube is full of these qualifications. And I heard my now sponsor qualifying. She has a lot of abstinence, so every year she did an anniversary qualification. And I loved the sound of her voice, her calm, her attitude towards the program. And I wanted what she had. And so I really thought, if I could just have her as my sponsor, if I could work with her, I think I could really get this. I could really focus and do it. And it took me a while to track down her contact details. She's based in Texas, but luckily I figured out that she was doing at that time a lot of service. So her email address was on the website, and I managed to contact her. And I didn't think she'd say yes, and she came back to me within an hour. I mean, considering that there's I don't know, 7, 8 hours between us, but she came back very quickly and said she wants sponsor. And since then, she's told me that at that point she had 5 sponsees and had
1 minute, Gillian, 1 minute.
That she wasn't taking anybody else on. So that was a miracle. That she doesn't know why she said yes, and I'm so grateful that she did. But yeah, so I just want to quickly say what I found, why Grey Sheet works for me. The first thing is, within 3 days of doing Grey Sheet, for me, the noise stopped. And I know it takes some people longer, so I'm not trying to say if you reach 3 days and it hasn't stopped, then forget about it. I mean, it might take you longer, but for me, that was my experience. The call to food stopped, the obsession with food stopped, the walking by a bakery and obsessing with what's in the window and I can't have it, all of that just went. And thank God it has never come back in the 5 years or more that I've been doing this. And the other thing that I noticed almost immediately was joint pain stopped. Like I mean, I was very overweight. I lost almost 100 pounds when I came into GreySheet. But the joint pain, even though I was still overweight, the joint pain stopped. So that obviously had to do with the amount of sugar, sorry for saying that word, that I was eating. My diet was heavily based on that. And then the other thing was that the headaches stopped. You know, I had horrendous headaches, and they stopped almost immediately. And just a level of peace. And just for my last minute, I just quickly want to say that the journey continues. And for me, that journey is about the big book, Working Steps.
Time.
Thank you, Nancy.
Wrap up though.
I'll wrap up. Yeah, thank you, Nancy. You know, doing workshops, getting into, there's a thing called two-way prayer, which was in the original AA, which is what our program is based on. I'm just saying this for the newcomer. These are big tools to use if you're new to this. There's also a book called Back to Basics by Wally P. I apologize if that's not literature I think it is. I think it's AA approved, but that's another foundational book for me. And yeah, just use all the tools but definitely that if you want to strengthen your spirituality and your prayer life, I would recommend that. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.